Hey guys, how's it going and welcome back. So, pros and cons to running an unsupported Mac OS on an older Mac. There are actually, I believe there's more pros than there are cons to doing this. But it kind of depends on the age of the Mac you're trying to do this with and what OS you're trying to get to. But obviously you want to get to an operating system that at least has security support, at least for the next couple of years. But it would be nice to have feature support and security support, but that's going to depend on your Mac. So here we've got my mid-2012 MacBook Pro that I've got hooked up to a 32-inch screen, and I'm basically using this thing for playing video games on it that, of course, don't run worth a crumb on my M1 system, because you know how they are. Even with wine-wrapped programs, it can be a real challenge. So it is good that Apple's gotten into AAA gaming now with the Mac, and it'll be great. But Apple is definitely going to be concentrating more on M2 and aboves with AAA gaming. Not as much on the M1s. We will see some more stuff come, but not as much as we will on M2, M3, and above. But anyways, so with Intel Macs, of course, they have a lifespan like any other Mac will, okay, including our new ones. Eventually we'll be taking our M1s and M2s and, putting unsupported OSs on them to give them extra life. But in the meantime, we're doing the Intel Macs for sure. And with the 2012, you can actually run Ventura, no problem, okay? I recommend using OCLP, which is Open Core Legacy Program, and you can easily just Google that and get to the website and follow the instructions the way they tell you to, and you can create your own USB boot stick that will allow you to get the OS on there. Now just keep in mind too, you have to know, of course, the specs of your Mac, like what year it is and model, and look that up on OCLP's website to find out what OSs are going to be supported. Because not everything is. Like my wife's got a 2010 and we're fine right up to Monterey, no hassle, but they do say if you try Ventura there will be some hardware issues. Well, there's a lot of issues, like you have no USB that's active, your Bluetooth is not active, you're on a laptop, of course, you're going to have the onboard keyboard and the trackpad will not be active, even though Ventura will ask for either a trackpad or a mouse from Apple to connect. I've tried it, it does not work, so there's no way of doing Ventura at this point on a 2010, unless somebody else has already figured out a way around that, which there is one guy on YouTube that claims he has, but I don't know what he did. I haven't watched the video. However, that is too raunchy of an OS even for a 2010. That thing only has 256 megs of video RAM, which is another issue. However, she is running on hers Monterey, but some programs don't even want to run because of the graphic requirement of the program. It just comes up in barks. So probably Monterey was not a very smart decision, but maybe Big Sur would be a better choice. Perhaps, we don't know, we didn't try, but Monterey at least, Monterey's still got security support for quite a while yet, so at least it keeps her old dog running. My 2012 has no issues with Ventura. It may end up having issues with Sonoma, but we don't know that until the public release happens and OCLP starts experimenting with Sonoma to find out what it's going to run and on what Macs it's going to run properly with. However, Ventura is a dream. There's not very many side effects here, but there are some to be aware of. Number one, because you're running an Intel processor, they always run hot anyways, as we know. But you're going to find that your temperatures, even at stationary, sitting there doing nothing, are going to be a little hotter than normal. Okay, like 40 degrees, 49 degrees. It might go as low as 30-some degrees. So I would probably recommend, if you want to keep the lower side on the flexibility side a little bit better, perhaps use max fan speed control, go into the constant fan mode, set it at 5,000 RPM, and that will at least help you out quite a bit. However, video editing, I've done that on this thing with iMovie, and I just do simple video editing, that's it. I cut my film, I clip out front to back where I don't want, I throw in my intro outro, and off we go to export. And my top temperature was 85 with 1 or 2 shots to 87 Celsius. that is actually doing really well, and even the export time was only about, I think it was about 10 or 12 minutes. It wasn't that bad. It was pretty much acceptable for that. But intense video editing, don't even think about it. You're going to definitely thermal throttle really bad. And the 2012 MacBook Pro does have 1.5 gigabytes of video RAM, so it's definitely a very ideal system, as if you have 1.5 gigs of video already. 16 gigs of RAM is something I would definitely recommend, especially if you want to do something like Minecraft. Minecraft wants basically 12 gigs, 13 gigs by the time you get the program running for a little while. And of course, you never get your RAM back from your OS when you launch a program, so that's still calculated. So that is something. You will find that some games may run a little sluggier than they did before. Well, that's because you've just put on a really raunchy operating system, so you can expect that there will be a few games you're probably going to want to throw in the trash, but other ones will still run absolutely perfectly fine, and some of them will actually work better than they ever did. So there's kind of a toss-up I've been finding after running this for quite a while. No problems with surfing the internet. You're going to be able to run the most current versions of GarageBand, Logic Pro, iMovie, Google Chrome browser, of course Safari. You're going to get your macOS updates. Now here's another negative side I found was we were running 13.5, now we're at 13.5.1. As of yesterday we got an update. Now that update on my M1 was only almost 2 gigabytes for the download, which was fine. It only took about 20 minutes. But with a, in this case, more or less hacked Mac, right? The update came for it as well for Ventura, and it was near 12 gigabytes, which is a complete OS reinstall, basically an upgrade overlap. Because every time you upgrade your OS, where you're upgrade, right, as the updates come down, you're basically overlapping, right? And so this does use a bit more drive space, not a lot, but a little bit. But it's a bit of a process. So it actually did a complete 13.5.1 OS, and it was like, that took like hours. And I've got 16 gigs of RAM, I've got a 480 gig SSD in here. Thank goodness I did not have an HDD. You do not want to do any of this with an HDD, because that is going to be so slow to get the install done, but even worse to try and boot your OS. It's going to be like, you can literally probably go have a nap by the time your OS boots. I mean, hard drives are that slow, right? But an SSD, you don't get as much time. You might actually get out to the kitchen, put the kettle on, prep your coffee, come back, and then your OS is definitely up and running full. Depends on the computer again, and how much horsepower you have for processing power too. But just be aware that not all Mac systems, even because they're older, are going to even work with going to even to get to Big Sur, okay, even. It's going to vary, so make sure you read the website versus what your Mac is. The first time I tried this, I believe, was with, I think it was OCLP. But anyways, I had issues with a 2009 iMac doing this, and I actually could not even download GarageBand or iMovie. Apple forbidded me, and I'm like, well, this bypasses all this stuff, right? Well, apparently not on that one. But so an 09 computer is probably not what you want to do. I would stick with 2012 and above Macs for doing unsupported OSs, because you're going to get the best results, okay? Now, the getting into, I think that's pretty much the end of our drawbacks on that. So we covered that 16 gig of RAM you definitely want. If you can't upgrade your RAM, you could do this with 8 gigs, because even Ventura on the 2012 is only chewing up about 3 gigabytes of RAM, where on my M1, Ventura wants like near 5 gigs of RAM just to get to the desktop. So we're actually using a little bit less RAM on an Intel chip than we do on an M1 or an M2, which is kind of interesting, but it's because of the way the computers are built and what they're doing, the hardware they have or don't have, right? So we do get a little bit better RAM usage on the Intel chips for sure, even with Ventura. So you could do this with an 8 gig machine, but just make sure that you've got ample enough drive space. So I would probably suggest Definitely nothing below a 256, and even that, I think your best bet would be in that case on a desktop. I would run an external SSD and just go for something like a half or a 1 terabyte. Put your OS on there instead of on the internal. Okay, so you're going to have to make sure it's hooked up and formatted properly. And you could do just as an external drive if you don't have the internal capability. Because I know on MacBook Airs, yeah, a lot of them you could upgrade the drives inside, but you could never do anything about the RAM. So if you've got you know, an old MacBook Air with less than 8 gigabytes of RAM, don't even think about doing this because it's just a waste of your time and energy. Just throw the thing out to the trash and get yourself a bit better computer. So, and MacBook Airs, they already run hot and they thermal throttle too easily as it is. So, for the Intel versions at least, okay? So I wouldn't do this to a MacBook Air with an Intel chip, no way. But anyway, for the pro side of this, let's look at all the good points. The good point is you get to get a few more years of usage out of your computer before you have to replace it, which is a huge benefit, especially in this time, you know, where inflation is kicking us in the buns with all of us. Prices are going up and up. Even with Apple, prices are going up. And it's like, this is just getting ridiculous, man. It's like you can't even afford a base machine anymore almost. It's getting that nasty. This is why we look to the used market, especially at M1s for sure. And you can always get some good deals at pawn shops on M2s even that are used, that are still in great shape. But just, you know, buyer beware of that whole activation lock system. Make sure whoever you're getting a computer from has not only signed out of their Apple ID, but they've also removed that computer from their account completely, and that Find My Mac is off. Otherwise, you're going to have a worse nightmare on your hands. So let's get all the goodie points. Okay, good points is, like I said, you get to run a more modern day operating system, which is a huge bonus. Okay, more years of use. You get to run all the up-to-date software that's current that you can get, like your browsers, your music programs, your other stuff, right? The other benefit I found, which was really super awesome, was a little feature in Ventura that's only available in Ventura, and probably newer, of course, is continuity camera. I am literally 8 feet from my computer. My phone is around 6.5 feet, we'll say, because of the way I'm sitting and the table I have here. I've got my phone actually on a stand, but we can just do this and, you know, try and get the right angle somewhere. Or we can do this, right? Or we can rotate it this way, or we're going to have it upside down. Either way, it flips itself around to whatever we need to do, right? So we can use continuity camera, and it works really, really awesome. So we can just look around places, and there's my 2012 right there with my big screen. And there's our DSLR camera that's cutting this video right now as we speak. And so continuity camera works beautiful. That, and I was so impressed with that. Because that's a Ventura feature that I love to have. Screen mirroring, that's another feature. You can do your screen mirroring either way. You can have, you know, your built-in display on your laptop plus your external. The other thing you can do is also screen mirror right to another computer, like my Mac Mini. If I select this, it's going to shoot everything right to my Mac Mini. So I can just leave this running here, like this setup, just turn around at my computer, my M1, and be running my 2012 on the screen. Now it does take over the screen from the Mac Mini when you do this, because you are mirroring obviously, but it does it, and I was like, that is so cool, right? So I also tried out my iPad, and of course if your iPad does support that capability as well, like my new iPad Pro definitely does, I can mirror my desktop right to my iPad Pro. I already tried it and was like, that is really sweet. That's too cool, man. I love that. Now, the only thing that we found that does not work right now, at least on the 2012 MacBook Pros, is Stage Manager. When you go to try and activate Stage Manager, you should get a dialog box come up that says continue, and it walks you through setting things up. Well, all we get is this, and that's it. and so we turn it back off. We're not going to be able to use Stage Manager. That's going to be a problem, okay? And so far nobody's gotten that to work yet, but I'm sure maybe that'll be fixed in the next release. Like maybe they'll have that when OCLP gets Sonoma up and running, maybe Stage Manager will work. Who knows? I guess we'll find out. And we'll find out too if we can actually run Sonoma on this old MacBook 2012, because you know I'm going to try it. Because Apple's going to give me the update even before OCLP gets their hands on trying to configure stuff, which may go against me because of root patches. It may not just go through. Because I am running the most current version of OCLP as well, which is something else. Make sure you download their most current version that works with your stuff. Okay, so that's another big thing. Otherwise, yeah, I've had no issues. All my programs run. I do have some games that went a little funky on me. I was able to resolve Motorbike. This is a game that I actually like to play. And get it to fire up here. And it had some graphic issues where it was getting really super sluggy. So all I did was turn off the acceleration for the enhanced graphic mode, but then I put rendering on to have faster rendering. And it did actually fix the problem, and the game runs really nice and smooth now, and that's all I had to do. And I always have a problem with that level. But, you know, and all these games that are in here currently all run absolutely great. No issues with any of them. And I have another folder of games I've been slowly testing out. Soldier of Fortune. Now, all these programs, except for a few of them, like Motorbike is a Mac-only program, but these other programs that are wine-wrapped, like Far Cry that I have in here, Far Cry and Gun are wine-wrapped. Fallout New Vegas is wine-wrapped. It runs as well, surprisingly enough. My Unreal tournaments are all wine-wrapped, and I used Paul Attal Porting Toolkit for this, because these are normally PC programs, so I just basically convert them to run on the Mac. Without having to run Windows. I've got San Andreas, I've got Vice City, a few other games here. They're all working just fine. No real issues there at all. So that's good that now I've got more and more games and stuff that I can do, because most of this wine wrap stuff doesn't even work with the beans on the M1s, and likely going to struggle on M2 as well. Because it's just the way it is, right? But there are ways to run PC games on the newer Macs, which is fine, because we can't run Boot Camp with Windows. But also with OCLP, they do say you can run Windows with Boot Camp. It's not a problem. There is a couple of little things that have to be done to get it operational, apparently, but it's simply laid out. They really are great at helping you to set things up right. And then you could run, you know, Windows separately from your Mac OS, which would still give you your real Windows OS, which your programs would run even better on, you know, when they're not wine wrapped, right? Because it's translation stuff. But yeah, otherwise, you know, you got some really great pros to this, like very great pros. They always outweigh the negatives in this case. So I think it is very worthwhile that if you do have an older Mac, you want to give it some extra life, check out the OCLP website, see what Mac you have, what you can support for an OS. There may be just some simple upgrades to get you a little bit newer OS that is maybe borderline. Like Catalina right now, you can run Catalina native on the 2012, okay? On the 2010, yeah, you're kind of screwed at High Sierra, which is now no more support for Google Chrome for security. There's some leftover security that should be good for maybe a couple more months, but it will not go to the newest version of Chrome. I already tried that on a computer, and of course, you know, Safari is going to be the same thing. It's basically out of security now, so whatever time frame you have, you have. Now, Catalina, of course, does run absolutely fine natively on this Mac because it's made for it, and it's going to receive the last of its security updates at some point this fall. So then we're only good for probably about another year, maybe I don't know. I don't even know if we're going to get past a year. It kind of depends on how things go. But it's supposed to get the last of its security updates this fall, and then that'll be it for Catalina. And so then you have to go to the next OS above that to get maybe a little bit of extra stretch time, and so on. But it's going to be kind of a variable, because generally we go from Catalina, we go into Big Sur. Big Sur right now, it's got no more support other than security updates at this point. I'm not sure where things are at with Monterey right now, if we still have some feature update capabilities, but I think we're pretty much done with it, because my wife's running Monterey, and we updated Monterey all the way, and then the next update that was ready to come down was actually Ventura. So Monterey's probably just going to be running on security updates now for a little bit, and then that'll be it, because Sonoma's coming out, and that means that Ventura is eventually going to go into security only updates for a while, because after Sonoma there'll be the next major OS coming down the pipe. So it's going to be some stretchy times, but at least right now, if you can get to Ventura without any issues, I think that's probably your best bet. Otherwise, go to Monterey until security updates are done, which we should get another 2, maybe. I'm thinking maybe possibly 3 years of security updates out of Monterey, so it should make that old Mac last a little bit longer before you're going to actually have to upgrade. But just keep in mind too, with the cons on this, you are going to take a bit of a performance hit. Boot times will be much faster on an SSD, but it's still going to be a little slower than running a native OS with an SSD. It's about almost twice the time for booting from a native OS with an SSD. So it is going to vary. It depends on your machine and everything else, right? But Ventura, I wouldn't do Ventura at all unless you have at least 1.5 gigs of video RAM. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to have some issues there. As my wife has found out with her 2010 with only 256 megabytes worth of video in the 2010 MacBook, yeah, it's just not the greatest experience, but it does work, and it surfs the net, it watches videos, but there's some programs that she just can't really make use of. At least iMovie still works, that's a good thing. But anyway, so that's my findings on this after running this for a while. I would still say, yeah, it's a great thing to do. It's going to help, but just be aware there are pros and cons, and that's about it. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll be sure to catch you on the next video.